Good day. My name is Laurie Sherman. I'm the Anti-Corruption Advisor at the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the Mission to Serbia. And I'm going to talk to you today about professional and ethical obligations of inspectors. The starting point is why do we care about corruption? I'm going to talk about helpful changes in the new law on inspectors, the obligations of inspectors, and the consequences of improper behavior. I am a lawyer by training. I have worked in a number of U.S. government agencies as an ethics officer, so I'm very pleased to be in Serbia working on such an important issue. The first question is, what is corruption? And the standard definition is that corruption is the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. It means using your government authority to enrich yourself, to enrich your relatives, to enrich your friends, to basically abuse your position. And we care about corruption because of its effect on the lives of citizens. It traps millions of people in poverty. It undermines the rule of law and trust in government. It impedes foreign direct investment and trade. It threatens domestic and international security, and it threatens the sustainability of natural resources. Corruption in Serbia is something that everybody has heard about. As you will see on the map, according to the Transparency International Corruption Perceptions Index, Serbia is fairly low down in comparison to its neighboring countries in the perception of corruption. And if you look at the map, the redder the country, the more the perception of corruption exists. To be more specific about corruption in Serbia, there are a number of surveys that have been done, including a very interesting survey by USAID of businesses, in which a lot of businesses said that 17% of them said corruption affects their business, but 27% said that they believe that, or they perceive that, bribery is a regular part of inspection oversight. Similarly, a 2014 citizen survey of inspectors also found that stopping corruption among inspectors is an issue. Now, these are surveys and they are perceptions, and it is not to say that inspectors as a general rule are corrupt. I don't want to give that impression. But I do want to give the impression that corruption in Serbia has a significant effect on the population. According to the Anti-Corruption Agency, as a result of corruption, at least 7,500 medical apparatus disappear, and 350 schools that should be fixed are not fixed. The seminars in these training programs are all related to the new law on inspection oversight. And that law increases transparency and it decreases discretion, and those are two important parts of curbing corruption. When you increase transparency and you restrict discretion, you limit the opportunities for corruption. And you'll hear more detailed explanations of the specific provisions of the law on inspection oversight in other parts of the workshop or other productions. But I want to focus on the ones that increase transparency and regulate discretion. Transparency applies in two different ways. The first relates to information that is made available publicly on a website so everybody can see it. And the second part of transparency is the information that inspectors are required to provide to the entities that are subject to inspection. And the provisions of the law that relate to this area, there are many of them. There are provisions relating to requiring the provision of information through request by the public. There are provisions that refer to publicizing inspection oversight plans. There are provisions relating to a requirement to publish all laws and regulations, checklists, findings of serious risks, assured opinions, and annual reports. Checklists, which are in Article 14, is a particularly important part of increasing transparency because they set out specifically what it is that an inspector will look for. And when you have a checklist, then the requirements of the inspector are applied consistently. Also, those checklists are updated annually and they are made public. Another article which increases transparency is the oversight warrant. That's Article 16, and it sets out the parameters of the inspection so that the body subject to inspection will know what to expect. Other areas of the law which increase transparency, one particular one is the assured opinion, that's in Article 31. The assured opinion, which is made publicly available, responds to a particular request for an opinion on what is correct and what is not correct according to the inspection parameters, and therefore tells everybody that if they behave in the manner set out in that assured opinion, that they will not be subject to fines or to any ill consequences. There are also provisions that give the entity subject to inspection the right to review and correct the minutes. It requires that minutes of the inspection records be kept in a uniform and electronic format so that everybody can have access to them and can compare the way that they are conducted. And finally, there's a requirement in Article 44 for the publication of annual reports with detailed information. The second part of the law is provisions which decrease discretion. Now, they don't do away with the discretion of inspectors. You will always have the ability, based on your expertise and your knowledge of the subject, to make decisions and to exercise discretion. But what it does, these provisions, is it limits the scope of the discretion such that there is less opportunity for corruption. The first one is Article 9, which requires a risk assessment. Your inspections will be governed to a large extent on areas where there is more risk. And that decreases the kinds of inspections that you will conduct and the places you will go. There is a requirement in Article 13 for advisory visits. After an advisory visit and the advice that is provided, there is no discretion to move away from that advice when you actually go to do an inspection. Again, the use of checklists, which I mentioned in the transparency part, also decrease discretion because it limits the things that you can look at and makes it clear what the scope of your inspection will be. Also, the detailed warrant for inspection, which sets out the scope, and the fact that in Article 17 you have to provide prior notice of the inspection and the checklist. So the entity being subject to inspection knows what to expect. A very important part of the decrease in discretion is Article 38, which is the consent by silence. Until this new law, there was no time limit on when an inspector had to respond, had to issue its report, had to tell the inspection entity subject to inspection that it met the inspection requirements or it didn't meet it. And that discretion to not respond led many people to say, well, if I give the inspector a little bit of money, I will get an answer faster. Article 38 says that there is a fixed time limit in which the inspector has to respond, and if there is no response by that deadline, then consent is deemed to have occurred. So that removes the discretion to play with timing. Similarly, there is an extensive record-keeping requirement which also removes discretion because it makes available to the larger public information about what happens. Now I want to turn to ethical obligations of civil servants. And these obligations come both from the Civil Servants Act and from the Civil Service Code of Conduct. The ones that I will discuss later will come from the law on inspection itself. So the first important obligation is impartiality. It basically requires that you don't conduct inspections or act on matters which affect your financial interests or the interests of your close relatives, where a family member has a job, or acts as an officer, director, attorney, contractor, where you or a close family member have a relationship with the owners, directors, or employees, where you worked previously, and where you are seeking or a close relative of yours is seeking a job. So what's the impartiality test? How do you know whether you're being impartial? There is a test which we apply, which is, would a reasonable person with knowledge of the relevant facts find your actions to be biased or lack impartiality? There's another test that we apply in Washington, which is, would you like to wake up tomorrow morning and read on the front page of the Washington Post, the largest newspaper in the city, about what you have done? Both of those tests are a way of thinking about what your action will be and whether somebody will think you are not being impartial. In thinking about impartiality, one quick quiz that you can take is to figure out whether an inspector who is assigned to conduct health inspections at a restaurant where her brother-in-law works, but she doesn't like her brother-in-law. In fact, she can't stand her brother-in-law. So the question is, can she proceed with that inspection? And does it matter whether the brother-in-law is the manager of the restaurant or the chef of the restaurant or simply a waiter? When you apply the impartiality test, the answer is she can't conduct that inspection, and she should immediately notify her supervisor and disqualify herself. The impartiality rules apply to this family situation even if she doesn't like her brother-in-law and regardless of his position in the restaurant. Now I'd like to talk about gifts, and there is a short video that has been produced by the Anti-Corruption Agency on gifts, which you now get to watch.
Da li primećujete razliku? Pogledajte pažljivo. Nema razlike. A ako vam kažemo da su to pokloni namenjeni javnom službeniku za Novu godinu?
Dobar dan.
Dobar dan.
Izvolite, ovo je za vas.
Jer ste uvek bili ljubazni i jer ste čovek. Zbog vas sam uvek sve obavljao na vreme. Selim se, a i Nova godina je, pa sam hteo da vam se odužim ovim znakom pažnje.
Jao, nemojte, molim vas.
To je samo čokolada.
Hvala. Nije trebalo.
Srećna Nova godina.
Srećna, sve najbolje, prijetno.
Može ovako, a može i...
Dobar dan.
Dobar dan.
Izvolite, ovo je za vas.
Jer ste uvek bili ljubazni i jer ste čovek. Zbog vas sam uvek sve obavljao na vreme. Selim se, a i Nova godina je, pa sam hteo da vam se odužim ovim znakom pažnje.
Nemojte, molim vas. Ja to zaista ne mogu da primim. U opisu mog radnog mesta je da budem ljubazan, tako da sam već plaćen za to. Meni bi više značilo da svoju zahvalnost izrazite u knjizi utisaka.
A pogledajte sada.
Dobar dan.
Dobar dan.
Dobar dan. Želim da vas pozdravim. Želim da se zahvalim na gostoprinstvu, na seminaru.
I nadam se da ćemo vam uzvratimo sljedeće godine.
Izvolite, primite poklon.
Hvala, nije trebalo.
Gotovo, idemo.
Gotovo, da.
Doviđenja, srećna Nova godina.
Takođe i vama, sve najbolje.
Doviđenja.
Srećan put, doviđenja. O, sat. Odlično. Baš mi je jedan ovakav trebao za dnevni boravak.
Može ovako, ali bolje je ovako.
O, sat. Kako ti se čini?
Odlično.
A šta je sa trećim darom?
Napred.
Dobar dan.
O, dobar dan, gospođo Ana. Kakvo iznenađenje.
Bila sam u blizini pa sam svratila do vas da vam čestitam Novu godinu i da vam dam jedan mali poklon.
Ja, nemojte, molim vas.
Molim vas, primite poklon. Tolike godine sarađujemo, a možda ćemo i da obnovimo saradnju, obzirom da smo se prijavili za novi tender.
Hvala vam najlepše, stvarno nije trebalo.
Vidjet ćemo se još. Prijetno.
Prijetno, doviđenja.
Doviđenja.
Doviđenja, prijetno. Šta je, što me tako gledaš? Svi tako rade, takav je sistem.
Sada vidite da ova 3 dara nisu ista. Jedan je prigodan poklon, drugi je protokolarni poklon, a treći je mito. Poklonom se smatra sve što javni službenik ili funkcioner dobije u vezi sa vršenjem svoje funkcije. Mito je dar u obliku novca ili neke vrednosti koju neko daje da bi na osnovu toga ostvario svoju potrebu, interes ili privilegiju koju ne može da zadovolji na zakonit način. Ili može da zadovolji na zakonit način, ali traje dugo, pa želi da ubrza proceduru ili da se osigura da će posao biti završen jer ne veruje instituciji. Kada poklon postaje mito i da li mito može da bude poklon? Ako vam neko uruči prigodan ili protokolarni poklon u granicama vrednosti definisanih propisima, možete ga prihvatiti bez bojazni da kršite pravila. Ako vam neko ponudi novac ili neku drugu dragocenost da biste uradili nešto u njegovom interesu, bez obzira da li je novac ili dragocenost dara pre ili posle učinjenog, vi ste primili mito.
Kao javni službenik, moja je dužnost da vodim računa o vrednostima kao što su objektivnost, efikasnost, čuvanje javnog interesa i da uvek radim u korist građana. Ukoliko prihvatim makar i simboličan poklon od stranke za obavljen posao, niko neće verovati da sam objektivan u odlučivanju po zahtevu stranaka, niti će verovati da jednako tretiram sve stranke. Niti će misliti da sam efikasan, odnosno vredan, ma koliko se trudio. Stvaram sliku o sebi da radim na materijalni podsticaj i da radim u ličnom interesu, a ne u interesu zajednice. Ukoliko je protokolarni poklon u pitanju, mogu da ga primim ako njegova vrednost ne prelazi 5% od prosečne neto zarade na nivou Republike Srbije. Ali pošto ga primam u ulozi javnog službenika, mogu da ga ostavim u firmi. Ako mi je ponuđen poklon ili neka druga korist da bih uradio nešto u interesu stranke, moja je dužnost da to odbijem, odnosno da uručen poklon vratim. Uostalom, zar bih dobio taj poklon da ne obavljam ovaj posao? A za njega sam već plaćen.
So what is a gift? A gift is anything of monetary value, regardless of the form it takes, regardless of when you get it, whether it's before or after your action, and regardless of who receives it. So it could be a gift received by your spouse, by a child, by a close relation, or by a charitable organization that's designated by you. And it includes transportation, meals, lodging, clothes, jewelry, though I don't think most people will give you a diamond ring, job for a relative, tickets to a sporting event or concert. So another quick quiz. For example, if the head of the factory offers you a coffee when you arrive to do an inspection, is that a prohibited gift? Obviously not. If the middle manager at the factory offers to buy you lunch when the inspection is finished, is that a gift? It comes after the inspection. It may come after you've finished writing your inspection minutes, but the answer is it's most likely a prohibited gift. You should pay for your own lunch. The head of the factory who lives in your building offers your son a ticket to a Robbie Williams concert. Is that a prohibited gift? Does it depend on whether your son and this person's son are schoolmates or good friends? Does it depend on whether the person giving the ticket knows that you're an inspector? There's all sorts of different factual situations that you can apply. I mean, you're better off paying for the ticket, is the answer. One of the foremen at the factory asks you to join him for a drink after work. Is that a prohibited gift? Probably not, but you're still better off paying for your own drink. If you have a situation, for example, where you have a veterinary inspector who often shops at a butcher shop near his apartment, and the butcher always gives him a little bit extra when he buys meat, is that a prohibited gift? What if the butcher does not know that Nicola is an inspector? What if Nicola doesn't conduct inspections in that area, but elsewhere? Does it matter whether Nicola asks for the extra or doesn't ask for the extra? Again, there's many different nuances, and you can come up with facts that will make it a prohibited gift and facts that may not. But you're always better off being conservative and saying thank you very much to the butcher, but can I please pay for the extra? The final very important obligation of inspectors, and of all civil servants actually, is the avoidance of conflict of interest. And this is part of the Civil Service Act, it's part of the Civil Service Code of Conduct, it's actually part of the inspection law itself, and it's part of the law and administrative procedure. And it says that you cannot take an action that has or appears to have an effect on your personal interest or that of your close spouse. And it's very important to recognize that it is not just actually having an effect, but appearing to have an effect. Because appearance is very important in terms of promoting trust. And appearance is something that lands on the front page of a newspaper. So there is a mandatory disqualification under the inspection law and the Civil Service Code that says you cannot make a decision, give advice or recommendation in any matter affecting your financial interest or the interests of your close relations, organizations where you are an officer, director, or employee, a former employer or business partner, or a potential future employer. Then we get to the question of what is officer liability. And here, Article 53 of the Law on Inspection sets out what they call special cases. And they're divided into two different kinds. One kind is a failure to act. So if an inspector fails to take, propose, or impose any measure, or fails to propose or initiate required proceedings, that is a failure to act under Article 53. The second kind is improper actions. So where the inspector acts beyond the authority that is given to that inspector, or where the inspector acts where there is a conflict of interest. Violations of Article 53 of the failure to act and the improper actions are considered to be major violations of the Civil Service Code. The Civil Service Code then says that a major violation is punishable, one, when you act when there's a conflict of interest, and two, when you accept a gift. The fines can be 20 to 30% of your salary for up to 6 months. They can constitute a demotion in rank or position. They can constitute a ban on promotion for 4 years, or in the most egregious cases, termination of employment. Now that you know your obligations, the question is, what are your rights? And Article 54 of the inspection law says that inspectors and civil servants who contact their internal control office in writing are entitled to protection under the whistleblower law. And under the whistleblower law, any citizen is entitled to report internally to an employer, externally to a competent authority, or publicly through the media and the internet, cases of corruption, violations of law. The whistleblower law protects you from retaliation and disclosure of identity. It provides judicial relief and compensation for damages. The problem is, unfortunately, that it is very, very difficult to be a whistleblower. And that the experience, both in Serbia and around the world, is that whistleblowers almost always suffer retaliation. They're demoted, they lose their jobs, they then go seek protection under whatever the relevant whistleblower law is, and it takes them 3 or 4 years of fighting to get back their jobs or to get compensation. So it is not an easy thing to do. It's too early to say in Serbia how the whistleblower law will apply, because it just came into effect in July of 2015. You know, it is there to be taken advantage of, but it comes with heavy consequences in many cases. So what does an inspector do who needs advice on whether conduct is ethical, or whether a gift is proper, or whether there is a conflict of interest? Within the inspectorate, you can always go ask your direct supervisor. You can ask the chief office of the inspection body. You can ask the Human Resources Service, or you can ask the Internal Control Office for advice. The problem is that there's not really a hierarchy of people who are trained in providing such advice. In many other countries, government agencies have ethics officers. They have people who are charged with providing this kind of advice. I mean, that's what I did in the United States for the U.S. equivalent of the Ministry of Trade and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I was the ethics officer when somebody had a question about whether they could accept a ticket to a concert, or whether they could go to dinner, or whether their ownership of a particular financial company was permissible. They came to me and I gave them an opinion, and if I said it was okay, then they were protected going forward. That doesn't exist in Serbia, unfortunately, and it may not exist for quite some time. So the advice that I can leave you is that you can try your direct supervisor, but you should err on the side of caution and act, even when you think that it's not an issue, just think of what the newspaper article would say. Now, there are some useful publications. The Anti-Corruption Agency has put out a publication called Ethics and Integrity in Public Sector, and I think that the websites where you can find these documents will be available to you so that you can look at them. And finally, you can always contact me, though I don't provide ethics advice. Questions or other things that I can help with, I would be glad to do. Thank you very much.